Afternoon, folks. Looks like we are up and running. Let's get everything swapped over, and we will begin today's drawing stream. Early for once. Hooray! Alright, let me turn on the BGM. I would have started even earlier, but for some reason my plugin that shows the track list titles decided it was going to stop working today. So we're running through the regular BGM playlist, but the playlist title thing is not working at the moment. So you can't see the title of the tracks, but it's just the main BGM playlist that we've run through before. How's everybody doing today? I see Red Dragon. What's up, Red Dragon? Iconic. How's it going, folks? Let me turn my BGM down on my headphones a little bit. Alright, so what are we working on today? Iconic says, doing better, thanks. Also, no stick. How are you? I'm assuming you meant you're not sick. Almost not sick. That's what I assumed you meant, Iconic. Well, glad you're feeling better. As for me, I can't really complain. I had to take off from the Earth job early today for an appointment. And I got back earlier than I expected, so that's why we're starting early today with the drawing stream. Red Dragon says, rating on FF14. I didn't know you play FF14. Have you always played FF14, or did you just start recently? That is a rabbit hole I refuse to fall down. But I know a lot of people that play it. I know Matt plays it. Does Ramen play it? I don't know if Ramen plays it. I know Bean Bun plays it. A lot of people play FF14. About a month. How are you liking it? Again, I've seen the depths of the rabbit hole, and just like any other MMO, if I pick that up, I'd get even less done than I do now. But hopefully you're having fun. I've heard nothing but good things about it. I just don't have the time. Oh, let's see. Let me explain a little bit about what we're doing today. I have on screen, probably could have zoomed out a little bit. These are the results from the last character concept sheet stream we did. This was right before I left. So it's been a little bit, where we are compiling ideas as a reference sheet for the information document I've been working on for the universe of fiction that I write for. And the end goal is to have one of these sheets for each of the different races featured in the universe. And this is the one we worked on last time, I believe. This is the water-based clan, if you will. And this one, the female model, I don't think I drew this one. I think I'd started the male one. Honestly, don't remember. But this is where we left off, so I wanted to show sort of final results before we move on to the next one. Also, as you can see right underneath my tablet here on the overlay, we've got the latest iteration of the promotional gifts that Wazi made for SOTS. This is the one that features Matt's character. And so you folks already know about the project, but the redeem, or command rather, I don't know if it's points, just the command, the chat command for SOTS will pop up a little blurb about the project and a link to the teaser over on YouTube. So this is sort of like the marketing tools in order to spread awareness of the project between now and when it comes out later this spring. And so I mentioned that there's a few different gifts. I think there's 3 or 4. Every time I stream, I'm going to switch it up to a new one. So that's the second one we've got today, and next time I stream tomorrow, I'll throw another one in there. I'll switch it up again. So we are going to continue the exercise for designing some basic characters and outfits for this particular project. And the next sheet in this series, I did start already, but I wanted to sort of recap this one since we left off on this one, I think. So let's flip over to the next one. We'll keep the primary here, and I may slightly tweak the poses a little bit. We'll see as we go. I don't want to have every single set of models showing off the outfits being an exact copy, but I'm more concerned with the outfits than the poses. I don't know, I can't move these. It'll misalign down here. The next one that we're going to work on is this particular race, which has a very different clothing style than the last one. And for some reason, I am still getting a low bitrate error, but I'm not showing drop frames on the broadcast. We're not doing anything super intensive today. We're just streaming drawing, but let me know if the broadcast starts acting up again, just like last time. I need to figure out what's causing that. That's the 3rd stream in a row where it's giving me a red bitrate error, but I don't know why. I might have to replace my router because there's nothing wrong with my connection, I don't think. I have to keep an eye on that. For some reason, that error just started happening when I got back. When I was streaming before I left, I never saw that red bitrate error. It was always green. Very strange. Let's see, we got a hydrate from Iconic. Drink water. Alright, let's start with the male model over here on the left. So what's the differences in attire choices here? This particular race, one doesn't have a lot of preference for symmetrical outfits, which we'll probably see on the armor. This one's going to be more clothing here. But as we'll see, and I'll try and demonstrate this when we're adding in details, there's a lot of asymmetrical kind of garb or garments, but also this race's attire tends to be less covering than the other one. The one we just showed off before this, the general style is very covering almost entirely on the body because that particular race spends a lot of time in the water. This one is a little bit different. The world that this particular group of people come from is a little bit more warm in temperature, but that's not the reason for the attire. Some of them it's kind of climate based, but for this one their overall preference isn't based on just temperature or anything like that, but over time the preference for garments that are more revealing and or less covering became common. And we haven't done, maybe I'll do that one next if we get to the next one today, which we should. The next race, which shares like a really close proximity world to this one, their attire is the polar opposite. While this one's more kind of asymmetrical and kind of chaotic and more revealing, the other world is very like covering, long, like robe-like garments. It's almost exactly the opposite. And I think it'd be cool to show the contrast, so maybe we'll do that one next. This particular group also has a pretty well-known fondness for body markings or tattoos. And so it's pretty common for people across the population to have these kind of decorations on the limbs, torsos, and even on their faces, which is a little bit unique compared to some of the other ones. And drawing those patterns can be kind of fun, kind of like runic patterns. Not so much tribal tattoos, but some of them kind of look like that a little bit too. Depends. And so we'll definitely work some of that in here. I'm trying to decide how I want to style the pants. This is meant to be kind of more casual attire. And everyday walking around, not necessarily combat for the male model. For the female one, we'll do more combat-oriented armor as opposed to just clothing. Maybe we can do kind of very loose-fitting, heavier material pants. Kind of like high boots slash, not necessarily greaves because these are armor plated, but maybe we can style something similar that'd be a little bit more casual but a bit heavier than just having nothing at all on the calves down to the feet. We've also just done kind of like capris almost that are cut off here, but I don't know if I necessarily like that style. I think I mentioned this last time, but the color paletting is also something that tends to be consistent theming amongst the races. These are all sketches, so you can't really tell. But when I eventually finish this information document, it outlines not only the colors of attire and armor and things that are generally kind of preferred within each race, but also kind of the physical characteristic colors you see, from skin tones to colors of hair and eyes, which does have certain themes between the two. Like there are some that only have a set color spectrum for like eye color, and same thing for hair color. And coming up with all that stuff over time was interesting. I wanted to kind of create a diverse set of physical attributes, and all that information is in this particular document. So if these were fully rendered images with coloring, shading, and everything else, I would have to follow that sort of color style guide when it came to figuring out the outfits and even the physical attributes of the characters. And so this particular race, skin tone wise, not that it matters for the sake of sketching here, but skin tone wise, they tend to be kind of medium color skin, a little bit darker depending on higher temperature climates they live in, and coloring their attire tends to be a bit more contrasting. And instead of really similar shades of like tones, you're going to see a lot more kind of clashing or contrasting colors in the attire. So like attire for just the body might be one color, but then it'll have very vibrant decorations or writing or painted characters to kind of really stand out. A lot of blues, purples, and reds from what I remember, and kind of dark colors with lighter accents or writing. Iconic says, character designing is something for sure I gotta get better at. Well, a lot of it is just practice. Like, I wouldn't exactly say I'm a pro when it comes to designing characters, but it's easily my favorite part of drawing. And so the best way to get better at it is just to practice putting concepts together and drawing them out to the best of your ability, and then also taking a look at other existing properties as kind of inspiration, but don't, wholesale rip them off. But when you're starting learning the basics of character creation, there's nothing wrong with taking some influence and looking at stuff that's already been created, which can be a contentious point. I guess it comes down to how you use what you're taking inspiration from. Like, just don't just create Goku but different colored hair. That's might be a good base to kind of learn the character design elements, but if you try and move forward with all of these things that exist in a really popular character, for example, then that's probably not going to work too well because people will notice, right? Red Dragon says, I like making the lore. Yeah, lore is fun. I like both. I think I have more character designs than I do lore. I only say that because if I look at my archive of character drawings, there's easily hundreds of characters that I've designed over the years that maybe aren't super nuanced, but they're all kind of sitting there with concepts, and if I wanted to use them for something like a story or a project or whatever, I just have to write their lore and the history behind the character. I mentioned it before, I think last time we were doing this, but a friend of the channel and fellow artist Pwups is a really good character designer. That's why I've worked with them on a couple projects. I can take a lot of the ideas for basic characters and say, hey, here's what we're looking for or what I'd like to see. Can you flesh that out into a unique character? And I could do it myself, but the design elements and details tends to work better if someone else who's doing it better makes an attempt. And on topic, that very reason is why I hired Pwups on as a character concept designer for Songs of the Spiral, or SOTS, as advertised here on the stream. And so when you eventually see the characters, which again, there's going to be no spoilers, so you folks will have to wait till the project releases to actually see them. But the character designs for the cast were drawn by Pwups and then adapted by Cap, who did the album art, and likewise adapted by Wazi for the animation. And I think I mentioned this before, but it might go without saying that the character designs are an extension of what we created last year. So, the exception of a couple new ones, all the characters' base designs were created last year in Lost Kingdom, and we built upon those for SOTS. And it's pretty cool the way all of that turned out, so I think you folks will dig it. And there might be some cameos showing up in the project as well from folks within the community. So that's another thing to look out for. We'll be doing a launch party for that one, a big launch party, once we have a release date. And depending on if I can get enough material together, we might have some behind the scenes stuff to either show off on stream or I'll put into a video like we did for Titanium Forest. We'll have to see what material I get. It's a little bit different because Wazi doesn't do captures of her animating. Red Dragon says, pizza at the party? Definitely. Will definitely be pizza, including pineapple. What I'm doing here is putting some patterns on parts of the pants. Be a little bit easier to see if it was colored. I kind of went with a simple sort of plating texture for these high boot slash shin pieces. Still kind of comes off looking like armor, but I like to imagine these are more just kind of textured pieces. They might not be made of metal or anything protective, but they just have this sort of look, just kind of like you would see in leatherworking, or like a real tough kind of fabric. A little bit tough to see in a sketch, but if I was rendering it out, I'd probably try and shade it so it looks more dense but not hard and metallic, for example. And for the shoes, we do kind of like a street shoe type look here. Shoes are kind of tricky. I used to have, and I gotta go back and look at some of my old references. I used to have a bunch of really specific concepts that are found in the shoes and footwear, but I forgot what they were, so I have to go back and remind myself at some point for the sake of consistency. But for now, those don't tend to be the main focus of the designs, unless it's armor. Armor designs, and when it comes to boots or armored foot pieces, that's a little bit easier to remember because I can follow the design philosophy for the rest. But for casual slash streetwear, I'm not terribly worried about it for now. We'll see if we can come up with a slightly more standout design for the female model over here, since that'll be armor based. All right, let's take a look at what we've done here. This one was about a third done, so we just finished off the rest and we can move on. So again, the idea is kind of casual streetwear over here. Come on. Cut off, sleeveless. I don't know what you call this, like a sleeveless shirt, like kind of like a form-fitting sleeveless shirt. On the arms themselves, we've got, these are meant to be kind of like bracelets, but they almost look more like bands or fabric. Again, rendered out, it would have more of a metallic look to it. But some arm attire here, accessories, that was the word I was looking for. And over here, this is more like a wrist accessory. Oh, let's not leave that there. Iconic says, looking great so far. Well, thanks. Again, simple designs-ish. But it's good to get these kind of ideas together and flesh them out. The point is to go through this exercise with every particular race so we have a good snapshot of the ideas behind each one. Again, paired with the information document, you're meant to read the overview and narrative and then see the sketched out examples to see what the narrative is talking about. Red Dragon says, oh, got to get you to make a Gits character lore. See what you can come up with. Is that Ghost in the Shell? That's the only thing I could think of with that particular acronym. Unless it's something else. Alright, let's... Oh, glitch in the system. Okay, well, it's... I was actually kind of close, now that I think about it. Your story's called Glitch in the System. I didn't know that. I feel like this might be the first time you mentioned the title by name. I know you mentioned talking about writing lore and being really interested in story writing. But I don't recall seeing the name of it. If I haven't, I forgot, I'm sorry. But that sounds like a very kind of futuristic, cyberpunk type story, just by the title. Is it like a far future, apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic future, alternate future? I'd be curious to hear what your story's about, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, Red Dragon. Alright, let's work on the female model. This one, we're gonna give her a neck piece. Maybe we make that a little more symmetrical in shape. Now for the armor, let me think a little bit about this one. Ah yes, Iconic's got a good point, Red Dragon. You could put some information related to your project in the media share Discord, where there's a bit more of a controlled audience if you don't want to put it out on stream. That's probably a good idea. If you want to throw something in there, feel free. I know Iconic's done that with some of his writing. Either link it to like a lockdown Google document or something that we can view but not edit, just again for consistency and safety. Oh, it's an isekai story. I see. Well, I'm of the opinion that there's nothing wrong with isekai as a story. If done correctly, it can still be very compelling. But yeah, like Iconic said before, if you want to share parts of your project, put it in media share, and you can check it out. Our community is pretty cool, so I don't think you have to worry about people trashing your idea. And if they do, then I will definitely give them a stern talking to, because that ain't cool. Alright, let's try an asymmetrical armor set. I think a little bit about the way I've kind of tackled this before. Also not making it so out there that it doesn't look totally practical. Let's see if we can adapt to sort of a cut-off body piece. but I want the shoulder and this arm to be pretty well armored. So might have to tweak a couple things. So we have further clarification for the world setting Red Dragon's talking about. Early steampunk magic. Nice. I feel like that angle hasn't been tackled by a lot of isekai media. It's usually fantasy. A lot of it's fantasy. I think some of it might be sci-fi too. Honestly, I don't consume a lot of isekai content personally. But steampunk magic, there's a lot of really cool aesthetic ideas there. Alright, might have to mess around with some of the details here to get the idea across. The idea for this torso piece that I'm working on here is that it's got different layers of armor to it, but the stuff that you see on this side, I'll delete that, is overlaid on top of the actual armor piece. It's not part of it. These are two pieces. This body piece is one, and then this additional layer that's going to go all the way down the arm is like another set of pieces that gets attached over it. The dragon says, the world rules. Magic is limited to runic signs. Ideas I'm looking for different characters that feel they're from other people. When I make their characters up, they are a little same. So like distinct, trying to make like distinct ideas without having too much overlap between characters. That makes sense. That's a difficult balance for sure. It does remind me of something that we haven't seen on any of the pieces yet that I've worked on here on stream. One of the races in this particular universe, I have the core type of energy that they use. The energy is a big concept across all the different races, and I haven't really talked a ton about that since it hasn't come up in the drawings. But each race is distinguished by their unique energy, which does different things depending on how their species evolved. There is one who has a really kind of attuned connection to their energy, and it's channeled kind of like a summoning ritual. And part of it is like a mix of like runic symbols and kind of symbology, like they call it in certain types of fiction, mixed with like a channeling or infusing of the energy from like a natural source. If that makes sense. There's no summoning, kind of like Naruto. There's no summoning per se. It's more a matter of a manipulation of auras, hence the name of that particular type of energy. And part of the art is figuring out how to channel that particular energy into usually a means of attacking. It's not really a healing type of power. So the user's will and technique tends to affect the shape. It might be something shaped like fire. It might be something shaped like physical blades or something sharp. Or it might be something a bit more formless. And that's been a concept I've been trying to develop for that particular race for a while, just to not make it sound like, oh, it's just straight magic, or it's Ki from Dragon Ball. A lot of it tends to manifest in physical designs, so when a character is using that particular type of technique, you see the runes like on their faces or limbs. And so hopefully that doesn't sound like it's just wholesale ripping off what you're talking about, Red Dragon. But I had a similar idea, so I'd be curious to see how yours fleshes out. Okay, I'm going to have to be a little bit careful with just making too much clutter with the details. This part here is just a tough fabric wrap around the midsection underneath the layers of armor, right around where the waist would be. And then we'll figure out the lower body outfit. Red Dragon says, it's fine. I was thinking that different races have more kind of magic than in other. More keen kind of magic than others. For example, dwarves are more earth and elves are more wind. Ah, so like elemental affinities and alignments. That's a cool concept to mess around with. So is it like the standard type of... not standard, but the traditional type of elemental affinities, like earth, air, water, fire? You could definitely do some cool stuff thematically with that. I think we talked a little bit about it before for this particular project, but the energy alignments with the different races in this particular universe I'm working on is more a factor of their evolutionary roots and the worlds that they inhabit, as opposed to like a magical affinity or alignment. There's no real concept of magic. This is far future like sci-fi as opposed to fantasy. But like this particular race, because they're waterborne and spend most of their time in the water, their energy is based around hydrokinesis. And so, without getting too much into the weeds on what that means for this particular race, there's basically a twin discipline path when it comes to mastery of their energy techniques. And it all involves manipulation of water. One school is the manipulation of the water itself, movement, and purposing it into blades or means to attack or waves or some sort of offensive capability. And then the other discipline is the manifestation of water. So usually people that are trying to build proficiency are more inclined to be one or the other. Different from something like water bending, where everyone's abilities, just how they manipulate the water itself. In this particular case, one school of discipline is really adept at taking that and doing different things movement-wise or attacking-wise. And the other school is skilled in manifesting it from like vapor or from the air to create as a source for others to use, or to change the properties of the water itself. So turning it to ice, turning it to steam or vapor, or the reverse. And so their ability to move it and manipulate it is limited, but the manifestation is what they focus on, and the other school is different, the opposite. And the entire point of that discipline system is that rather than have mastery over both, which is supposed to be difficult, very difficult to do for members of the race, their abilities, instead it focuses on the idea of duality. So for this particular race, you usually have two-person teams paired up where one has the mastery of the movement and attacking, and the other person has the mastery of the manifestation. So they're creating the resources for their partner to use, and so they're pairs. And it focuses on this idea of complementary skills, which I've been fleshing out a little bit, and I think it has some really interesting potential, just because if a team like that was split up, they'd have to fight using their own unique skills without relying on the other. And I think that could create some really interesting scenarios where, if you only have proficiency in one school and not the other, how do you deal with that if you're separated from the other person that's part of that kind of complementary balance? And if you guys want me to talk a little bit from a design perspective about each race that I'm designing when I'm designing them, like right here, if you want me to explain a little bit about how the energy principles work, if you're curious, I can talk about it. I just didn't think anyone would be interested because it's kind of a technical explanation since it's different for every race. But I can definitely talk about it because it's all in my brain. It's there. Now for this particular outfit, we're gonna go a little bit more spiky again. This is armor. This is something you'd see for combat. This particular race also likes gauntlets, clawed gauntlets. So you'll see this type of setup for their gloves or their hand plating, where it's these really sharp armored pieces that double as weapons. Oh, I see what you're saying. Further up, a dragon in the sort of combination of the elemental affinities. So like a combination of 60% wind, 40% earth would result in like a sandstorm type of magic. Now that's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of that particular angle when it comes to like a magic composition. So like how the elemental energies are infused would drive how it manifests, I guess. So like a fire and earth combination would probably be like lava, or like a magma or molten type of magic. This is just me throwing ideas out there. The real question is, do you have mechanic designed around opposing elements? Like if we think about it in simple terms, like Pokemon, for example, if you have like a fire type and a water type, then it negates the weaknesses of both in a lot of cases. So like a 50-50 fire and water elemental combination, does it yield something different or does it nullify? I would say for the 4 traditional elements, the opposing ones would be fire and water, and then wind and earth. That's an interesting thing. You probably have a lot of potential for kind of mapping out unique abilities and whatnot. And I am just putting off what I'm going to do with this lady's other arm. I don't know. It's not going to be armored like this one, at least not in the same style. Again, trying to show off asymmetry. But to give kind of a basic overview of this particular race's energy properties, as it were. Unlike the one before, which grants control over water, hydrokinesis, this particular race's energy is more like an infusion of the living will of the user, which is a bit of an abstract concept, but the practitioners of the energy techniques that this race uses, or possesses rather, can use their energy to manifest it into a physical embodiment of the user's will. And that can take a couple different forms, whether it's like a weapon or some sort of just instrument or tool, to a physical living, like a summon type creature. And really high levels, the energy can manifest itself as something that is capable of gaining sentience. You can kind of think of it like a stand that's got its own free will connected to the user. And so some of the characters I've designed have these really complex creatures that are tied to their energy that they can kind of call forth and use as a means to fight an opponent. And they vary wildly from just creatures or beasts to more kind of like mythological like creatures. It just depends. Oh, I see what you're saying, Red Dragon. So based on the race and the composition of the elemental affinities would determine kind of like a almost like a rock paper scissors type thing, right? The combinations would be more effective against others. That sounds like it'd be very complicated to map out, but if you can come up with a system that is kind of circular, then it would be really interesting to kind of design like a battle system and, you know, factions and things around that. That's a pretty unique idea. I have to say, I haven't heard of someone taking that particular type of approach to like a magic system. So pretty cool. All right. What are we gonna do for this lady's lower body? I think I want to go like a kind of tattered half dress that's got a bit of armor to it. So you want to make sure the legs are still protected. Let's say the armor goes down to at least about the knee. And I imagine, I'm trying to think of how functional it would be. It's not attached to these upper pieces. I'm trying to draw a little bit of a division right here. But these would most likely be inset on the fabric itself, maybe either adhered or attached to the lower body instead of being part of this upper one, or you wouldn't be able to move. Instead, it's got to be able to move around the legs. Again, combat armor. Oh, I see. There's a vampire race that your brother, I'm assuming your brother designed. That sounds like it could be interesting. Okay, for this leg, I don't really like the way this is textured. Could do that a little bit better. This character does have leg armor, at least for this particular one. Imagine it'd be a little bit weird to have one leg be armored and not the other, but this side is essentially protected by the plating. So in order to not have just a glaring lack of defense on one leg, then we're gonna do like an armored greaves type setup. Oh, we gotta save from iconic. Good call. I haven't saved it all today. Thank you. Good looking out. Our dragon says, yeah, he brought the idea to me and I adapted it into the universe. That way I need other people's POV so I'm not missing out on something. That makes sense. That's cool that your brother's kind of like a collaborative part of your process. My brother has no real interest in this type of stuff. He's not really an artist. He is kind of a creative person, just not when it comes to like character design and stuff like that. This type of discussion will probably bore him to tears. We also have a hydrate from Red Dragon. Okay, we're gonna do kind of like a leg wrap on this side, since again, based on the half dress here, still want some armored shoes and footwear, but we'll do that, sort of, again, keeping the idea of asymmetry. Oh, I have an idea. I was trying to think about whether or not I wanted to leave all this open space here in order to kind of secure the shoulder piece in place. We're going to go with the strap crossbody here. I think that functionally makes a little more sense. Red Dragon says, I'm up for all ideas. If I do publish my book, I will credit people who help out. Oh, for sure. That's why I said I think you'll... I didn't check to see if you put anything in the Discord because I have it on my other screen here. But if you share your stuff and people have ideas that you might be able to use for your story, then I think that would be really helpful and good for just bouncing ideas more than anything. I know Capri Sun has done that to some extent with some stuff that they've been working on. Same for Iconic. Oh, okay, not yet. Gotcha. But yeah, the general rule for everybody, as you know, is just to be respectful of everyone else's work. I don't think I have to tell you folks not to steal anything, but if you offer criticism, just be constructive. I don't think we really have to worry about that with you folks, but oh, it's in notes. Gotcha. Yeah, I have read through some of the stuff that Iconic has written. He's shared some of the stuff with me just to get some feedback. I don't know if I've mentioned it, but my 9 to 5 regular day job is very similar to editing in a lot of ways. I have to read a lot of material, and so I have to read narratives. It's not fiction, it's not novels, anything like that. It's far less interesting, I guarantee it. But I have to read a lot of written work for my job. So if people send me or share things and you want or recommendations or constructive criticism on narrative flow or how things are written from like a mechanical standpoint, then that's what I do for a living, more or less. So when it comes to like the narratives and the story writing itself, or even things like grammar and whatnot, that's what I get paid to do, is review stuff like that and make sure it reads well. So if you ever want something like that, then we can definitely talk on Discord, and I'll see what I can do. Red Dragon says I'm dyslexic, so it's a huge mess. I get it. That's definitely going to be a challenge when it comes to writing and stuff like that. Fortunately, I can't really recommend too much from that perspective, since it's not really something I have a lot of experience with. But you can be sure, if nothing else, not that I think it needs to be said, but I don't judge people on their work when I read it. As long as you're not asking me to read like something either really controversial or weird, you're not going to have me mocking you for it. Again, that's not cool. We don't do that here. All right. Now for footwear on this one. Keeping the idea of asymmetry in mind. The footwear itself is not going to be asymmetrical, but the design on each. Let's see what we can come up with here. Red Dragon says I have notes on races, magic, and the way I want the story to go. Again, I don't want it to feel like all the characters are following a story just because the story said so. Have you ever tried writing a plot outline, Red Dragon, when it comes to your, like, the main story you want to write? Because that's the way I've done it for a couple of the ones I've worked on, is before I even get to the narrative of writing stuff, I will plot out not necessarily to the granular detail, but like a plot progression of things that I want from start to finish. And then kind of from there, I'll separate it out into, like, if it's a chapter-based structure or if it's just, one narrative itself. Once I have the sort of structure and skeleton of it, then I will go back and start fleshing out the pieces that I want and grouping them before I start writing any narratives. That might be one way to kind of approach it, because then you can, again, put a structure together and then fill in parts as you sort of build it out. Might be worth experimenting with if you haven't tried that before. I think Iconic and I talked about that once, as far as like a plot synopsis and summary that kind of maps out the progression of story details and elements. I see. So you've mapped out a basic outline for your characters and your character and your brother's character. Well, if they're the main characters of the story, then that's probably a good place to start, because it drives the core focus. And then if you have other characters, you kind of look at how the storyline's going to be revolving around the main characters and how the side ones and the additional parts of the cast fit in. I don't think there's a real right or wrong way to do it. That looks terrible. Dragon says that's a problem having how other characters react to or with the main. Well, another thing you could do, again, I'm just throwing ideas out here. You can take or leave anything I say here, and you're not going to hurt my feelings. Another thing that helped me a bit when defining the characters for the story, even before the story is created, like the structure, even before the outline and everything else, it's doing a sort of deep dive into detail on how each character behaves. And it doesn't have to be like, character would say this or that. It's more a matter of writing down the character's personality, distinct traits in how they act, and maybe things connected to their history, or things that build a picture of who that character is. So let's say it's like your young protagonist, and your young protagonist doesn't have a tragic backstory for like a first in anime, if you're doing an anime. But let's say you have a young protagonist who always lived in the shadow of his older brother or older sister, and as a result is not confident in his abilities, so he tends to be hesitant whenever he's trying to solve a problem. And then from there you can build out some character traits like, not confident or kind of timid around certain people, or overly confident as a front, or kind of like an act because of what the character is hiding. And so you basically write out traits about how the characters act and things about their personality. And then when you're looking at having the different characters interact in different scenes, then you could say, well, okay, here's character A, the protag, and here's a new character B. Based on what we know about each of them, what informs their interaction? Are they going to immediately get along? Are they going to be immediately combative? Is there going to be parts of their history or their personalities that are just going to be a clashing point? And then having all that kind of mapped out for each of the characters might give you a bit more of an approach when it comes to figuring out how they would interact. Because okay, here's the traits from one, here are the personality traits and mannerisms or whatnot of the other. What's going to be this dialogue if they're going to talk or meet or what have you. Oh, no problem, Iconic. I'm just giving general recommendations. I'm not I'm not a published author, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But when it comes to the conceptual development, I've done a lot of that. A lot of it's probably going to be stuff you folks never see, but part of what helps flesh out that process is kind of getting in the heads of your own character. And saying, well, how would so-and-so deal with this particular situation? Or what would happen if I put so-and-so in this position or this situation with this other character? Red Dragon says, I understand, but most feel the same as my main. I've been trying to set it up like a D&D story, setting the character, then the story, and I just want each of the characters to have their own goals. Well, character motivation and what sort of drives the characters in your story is important. And I think one way to set them apart from your main character would be to make sure their origins and their history is different. If you know the story of your main character, then, like, let's just say again, similar to the example, your main character is the plucky protagonist who's trying to prove himself out in the rest of the world because he lived in the shadow of someone greater. Then having a character who has that same arc would be redundant. Now, you could have another character that's trying to prove themselves, but for different reasons and different motivations, and that can set the arc differently while still having some common ground as to why the characters might party up or even why they might be adversaries. Maybe both characters for different reasons are after the same target, being the villain or an antagonist for different reasons. And you can kind of set your motivations by changing up what the reason is for said motivation. And that could be useful, especially when you start messing around with things like the perception from different characters of events that happened, or how the perception is shaped by what they learn from other people, whether what they learn is correct or not. The whole big misunderstanding is a bit of a trope, but you can do kind of a lot with the idea of character motivation that stems from not understanding what happened, and then sometimes that causes a resolution, sometimes it causes a greater conflict. It just kind of depends on how you want to set that up. And so that might help to think about. Establishing the history for what motivates the characters, and then making sure that history is unique, I guess, is probably the most succinct way to summarize what I was trying to explain. All right, let's go ahead and save this. And let's take stock of what we've got here. We'll hide the primary, so that's easier to see. Oh, and we have a stretch reminder from Iconic. Oh. No, my left arm is a little sore. I had to get blood taken at my appointment today, and they took a lot of blood. Red Dragon also adds, what I need help with, I feel like it might be easier to have other people make their characters in the universe, and then I could push forward the story and get feedback on what their character would do in certain situations. Now that's definitely something like you mentioned, a D&D campaign where you're kind of the one orchestrating the story and everyone else's character is a player in said story, which would definitely be like a good tabletop RPG setting, because you can be the one who establishes the world, and then the whole story as you write it also depends on how the people who are in the story with their characters interact. but that would be a challenging thing to try and write from like a story perspective versus like an interactive game. And so depending on what you see as far as how you want your story to play out, you could always ask people to kind of create a character and role and then give them scenarios from your story to say, okay, I'm not going to tell you what your character would do. Instead, here's a scenario of what the character is doing. Tell me how they would react to the situation. And then you adapt that feedback into how you write your story. Because it's kind of like a survey where, you know what the story is and you're presenting people with the information and have them tell you, okay, my character is, like, let's say a mage, like a wandering mage. This is a character someone creates. And your scenario is, oh, there is some sort of world-threatening catastrophe that happens that this character finds himself in. How would they react? And you have the person who has the character say, oh, well, the character would do this, this, or this in that situation, and this is what their goal, motivation, or resolution would be. And so maybe you can frame it that way, where you're basically, again, like a survey, and see if people that you talk to would be willing to kind of role play the character in that situation in order to give you information that helps you write the story. That'd be a pretty interesting approach. It's kind of like a collaborative story building. All right. So this is concept sheet number 4 of 11. We are almost halfway there. I think this one will do. What we have is some kind of contrasting design elements between the outfits here, 1 and 2. Still haven't decided if I want to go back and draw more faces later. I'm going to stick with 2 for now. Just female and male for now. I'm not going to spend any of the conceptual time looking at like androgynous characters or whatnot yet. That's something I'm still building out between the different races and which ones would be more inclined to have that particular type of like character design. So for now, we're going to stick to the binary genders of male and female for the sake of contrast. Red Dragon says, assuming you meant survey story. Well, hopefully that concept helps. You know, just throwing stuff out there. So if it helps you flesh things out, then no problem, my dude. Just kind of came to me as you were explaining how you wanted to build out that world. Kind of like Choose Your Own Adventure, but a bit more like scenario based, I imagine. Another design element that I'll throw in here. I was working on it for the one before this as well. But this race is eye shape. Or not the shape of the eyes themselves, but their pupils are uniquely shaped compared to the others. Maybe I drew this a little too small. But the pupils are narrow compared to the other races. So if we're looking at it even more magnified, the shape of the pupil would be kind of like this, as opposed to completely round like most. But the key distinction is we're not talking about like super narrow slit pupil like a snake. That will come into play with a different race, which we probably won't see till a little bit later. But there is one that has basically serpentine eyes. This particular race also has one, I know it's a bit of a trope, so I won't do it too much, But heterochromia is something pretty common in this particular race where the irises are different colors. I know anime does it all the time. But also dark sclera. So the whites of the eyes, just like female model up here, are sometimes dark. Either one or both. It doesn't have to just be one at a time. But sometimes the eyes are dark in like this. It's a genetic trait. It's not like a magical or anything like that. It's just a genetic trait like anything else. No, don't get me wrong, Iconic. I think heterochromia is cool. It's just every OC nowadays, not every, but a lot of OCs nowadays, people think, oh, I want to create a cool aesthetic. I'm going to make their eyes different colors. Well, it's definitely cool when you see it everywhere, then the kind of punch wears off a little bit, you know? I remember I was talking to someone, maybe it was Pups. We talk about character designs a lot, and I had this idea for a character eye that I said, I don't think I've seen it too much, or at all that I could think of. But if we think of, I'll just draw the rest of the eye like this. This part's not important, I'm just framing it. But you know how you have one eye one color on the iris and the other eye a different color, heterochromia? I said, what if you had two colors in one iris? So the way I kind of envisioned it, if we think of the highlight, which is a little bit tricky to draw up here, half of the iris is one color and the lower half, again, I'm not doing this in color, so it's kind of hard to see, but the lower half is a different color and it's shaded accordingly, so you have like a gradient eye, two tones. I think that'd be an interesting idea. One of the races that I haven't shown off yet, they don't have pupils. So, again, we're doing an eye study now. That's okay. I'm gonna definitely talk about this when I eventually get there. But they don't have pupils, so their eye, even with the highlights in it, it looks like a gradient, but it's only one color. It's not the greatest example, but instead of having something dark in the middle like a black pupil, there's nothing. They don't have pupils. So the eye looks kind of dull. And yeah, for this example here, Red Dragon, kind of like yin yang eyes, but not vertical. Like normal yin yang looks like this. So instead of like that, it's more like that, with this being one color and this being the other color, and then the people in the middle. I don't know if I've ever seen that in visual media tropes. Maybe it exists and I just haven't seen it yet. I totally drew a Pokeball there. But that's not something I've seen, so I might try and adapt something like that. I don't know, maybe Naruto's done something like that with all their weird, like, Sharingan, Rinnegan, different eye types they have, but I've consumed a lot in Naruto because they lost me. Eventually when we get there, we'll see the other race, their eyes. Keeping the same shape. Look like that. Serpentine. That one's going to be interesting when we get there. As far as like two-tone eyes, Red Dragon asks, would it be two near colors like green, blue, or any colors? Good question. I think the idea that it's very contrasting, not clashing, but very different shades in one is probably going to show up better. But, you know, like it might look super goofy and then is not worth it at all. I don't know, because it's not just the coloring, it's the shading too. So like there has to be proportional shading from like light to dark in each shade, and maybe that's gonna be what kills it. But I don't know. I think the idea is worth exploring. Another idea that I know I talked to Pups about specifically was the last one. Then we'll move on. You have the iris like this with the pupil, and you have kind of like a ring of color around the outside. Not like a cataract, but more like a highlighting tone, like a trim around the perimeter of the iris, and then the rest is a different color. And I definitely know I haven't seen something like that. Again, it's sketch, so it's kind of hard to see, but it'd be like a gold trim around the eye and then red. Now that I think could be also pretty distinct in color, but it's hard to say without going and putting it into practice, right? The Dragon says, because if you look at the color wheel, eyes like that blurring together might look good. Yeah, I think you probably have to do some sort of gradient or a blend right where the eye line meets to kind of mix the colors a little bit so it doesn't look like a person just has their eye, bisected in half with one color fill here, one color fill here. That's a Pokeball again. But you probably have to have some blending, and that might be difficult to do unless you're doing like a static render. Because if you're drawing like a visual novel or like a manga type character in color, having to do that color blending on the eyes in two tones would be a nightmare. You have to do it all the time. So I don't know. It's either have to be a blend or maybe, there's like a jagged division of color. It's hard to say. I do think eyes are pretty important. I wish I was better at drawing them in my characters. But when it comes to unique design traits, like the other race we were just talking about, I don't know if I mentioned this before. I was doodling this before the stream started. But the waterborne race that spends a lot of time in the water, descended from aquatic creatures, their eye is another one that's unique compared to the others. And it might be hard to see in this one because it's shaded in. I know I said this was the last one, but this is something I forgot to mention earlier. If you draw like the eye, here's the iris, colored part. Their eyes tend to be a mix of blues and greens, a little bit of maybe gray, and then that's about it. You don't really see red or brown or yellow or purple eye color from this particular race. But their pupils are crescent shaped. Inverted crescent shape. Which comes specifically from the idea of a shark's eye. Certain sharks have this sort of weird looking pupil in their eye. That's where it comes from. But this race is the only one that has the inverted crescent shaped pupils. It's one of their unique physical attributes. And it shows up much better in color. When everything's shaded in one tone, it's harder to see. But when you do like a gradient and actually put like the coloring around it and whatnot, then it creates some pretty cool effects. And so, what did I say? That's like 3 or 4 unique types of eyes amongst the races. And you folks have seen 2. 2 in practice. Then I explain the others briefly. Alright. Let us move on. I think we have enough time to at least get started on the next one. Let's do a perspective this way. We'll do the male one first on this one. So like I mentioned, this particular race is planetary neighbors with the one we just did, but design-wise and cultural-wise and everything, they are very different. And I'll explain a little bit about that as we go. Might be more obvious in the outfits. But let's go for maybe a slightly older gentleman here. I'm really bad at portraying character age, so it's going to be like an old senior man, but not like a young teenager. Go a little bit older than that. Let's not forget to flip the canvas every once in a while. That is the wrong direction. Less concerned with the full body renders of the outfits for flipping the canvas, so much as I am for the faces. Let's give this guy more of a neutral, stoic expression. I know most of these characters look like they're kind of grumpy, but it's mostly just to have like a neutral expression on their faces. Maybe some might have a bit more of a grin. But if we were fleshing out the personalities of the character, we definitely give them more expression. What happened to a pen? Damn. Pulled a slightly lighter shade by accident. Alright, so one of the key design elements for this particular race that we'll talk about maybe a little bit as we go. And slightly altered the angle here, but that's okay. This race has these crystals that are embedded in their forehead that form from birth. They're not planted there or put there. They are part of their physical anatomy. And what you might guess is the reason for that, that's actually a little bit low. Let me put that one a little higher up. It's right here on their forehead. This race is psychic. That is the whole basis of their energy and their unique abilities. While being physically smaller than a lot of the other races and less physically imposing, it is because their power comes from psychic energy. And that's what these crystals are for. They're a conduit. Red Dragon says, attached to the bone. No, I did think about that because that question came up when I was originally designing the concept. So instead of being attached to the bone, the way it works is... Oh boy, I get to try and draw a skull. If we think of the humanoid skull shaped like this, and let's see, like, here's the eyes, and the teeth. The teeth are not important, but here's my very crude rendition of a skull. On the forehead, there's a hole. there's actually a hole, and if we were looking at it head on, the hole would be right here. It's a hole in the center of the skull where that crystal develops. And so it's part of their head, essentially, but it's kind of like the way a nail forms, where it extends out from the body and forms outwards from the body, but it's not removable. I guess you can remove your nails, but that would hurt. But it's embedded in their forehead, and if you were to physically remove it, then beneath the skin and muscle and things that protect the actual brain itself, it does lead to the brain. So if you were to like take out someone's crystal and just like put something sharp through it, you'd puncture their brain and instantly kill the person. Red Dragon asks, could they be harvested? Interesting question that may or may not be related to one of the story lines involving this particular race. But yes, in theory, if you wanted to harvest these things from the bodies of this, or skulls of these people, you could. Which would be highly illegal. It'd be like harvesting somebody's eyes. But one of the key facets of this particular race's technology is they've invented physical, reproducible versions of these crystals they use as power sources that can conduct the energy, the type of psychic energy, and use it as a power source. So like a larger scale than just these small ones in people's heads. It's part of their tech. So I imagine unless there was a specific reason why you'd want one from a person, it's not really going to do a lot when most of the technology already has larger scale versions that do, something similar as like power sources. Maybe they serve a different purpose and that's why they'd be desirable. That's something that I'm surprised you picked up on, because it's something I've thought about for a storyline. But it's nothing fleshed out, so I can't really say. Okay, this dude's gonna have long hair. It's gonna be tied up. And I miss sort of when my hair was that long. Now I'm just happy that whatever hair I have is sticking around. But it was that long at one point. I see Red Dragon says, like, the pearls rich people could use to show them off. I think, aside from the idea of harvesting them to use, the idea that certain people might be born with different types of these psychic crystals and might be a bigger sign of status is definitely something that could be a thing. It's not really a concept I've explored yet, but I kind of like the idea that there could be divisions within society depending on that particular idea specifically. Like color-wise, they don't have a set color scheme. I think they can be any color from what I've written. But maybe certain colors of crystals are typical of people in different parts of society. Different classes, rather. Don't know. Yeah, black market for head gems. The underground forehead crystal market. This particular race doesn't have any unique aspects for their eyes. Their eyes are just quote unquote normal. Conic says, be right back, gonna eat dinner. Alright, enjoy your dinner. We'll be grinding away. I'm gonna save again, just so I don't forget. But yeah, enjoy your dinner. Red Dragon says, so if they're different colors, then that means some colors are rarer than others, and they could be worth more than the others. That's definitely true. It could definitely be a viable plot point that some colors are so rare that they're sought after, which, again, if you're thinking about like an underground black market, essentially body part market, maybe there are some that are born with like an obsidian pure black forehead crystal, which is extremely rare. I hadn't even thought of that. But if they're regular, RGB colors, to use lack of a better term, any shade of regular color, but the ones that are like pure white or pure black might be extremely rare. Maybe primary colors are common. I actually haven't thought a lot about the colors of the forehead crystals. I just know I didn't define a specific color when I was putting that idea together. That idea is extremely old too. This particular race was one of the first ones I created. It was psychic people. What makes them unique? Just design-wise, they have these crystals in their foreheads. Red Dragon says rare color crystals of different power levels. That's also an interesting angle to approach it. What drives the fact that there's a rare color? Is it because it's atypical of quote unquote regular people? Is it the result of mutation? Is it more representative of people with some sort of rare power? I don't know, but I might take that last one into consideration when designing the villain for one particular story I'm working on. Because I kind of like the idea that the villain would have a design element that's more unique. And you don't have to worry about detail. Those are all good questions to ask. You've brought up several things I didn't even think about when it came to the in-universe lore things for these, which is good. All right, we're gonna mirror this. Actually, let me do the neck first. This will be the female model. We'll go a little bit further out. This is gonna require shoring up a little bit on the outline, but that's definitely too close. The eyes too close together, that'll look weird. With kind of a small anime nose on this one. Erd Dragon asks, are the gems like crystal or more solid color? As that could be the power, it could equal power level 2, or like mood rings, it could show if they're struggling with something. I will say that the way I've designed it, they're not faceted. So they're not like a gemstone, kind of like a diamond or anything, where they have like flat faceted parts. The crystals are smooth. And so if you were to look at the surface, it's actually a good question. If this is the forehead and this is the forehead crystal, it's not going to have flat or like rough surfaces. It's going to be smooth, like a polished gem. It's just the way they're formed. As far as whether or not they would have some sort of effect or change color, when you say hard to see, do you mean like hard to see the color or hard to see the actual stone itself? Like the way I've kind of designed the interactions, they don't change. Like there's no effect on the crystal. Like they don't glow. They don't like flicker or change color depending on like the mood or anything. And that's mainly because the psychic energy this race uses is invisible. You can't see it. It's manifested through the mind and channeled through the body, but it doesn't have like a physical aura, like a key, or like a again, Dragon Ball is a simple example, but like an energy aura in that. This race doesn't have that. You can't see their energy because it's psychic. It's invisible. So there's no change to the crystal or effect, because even though it's channeling through the mind, it doesn't have a visible manifestation. Therefore, it doesn't change the way it looks. It's an interesting idea, but I did think about that specifically. And to that end, because it is a critical part of the race's anatomy and everything else, I'm not going to put it on any of these models because I want to be able to show off the actual design. Some of them wear headgear that covers and protects this part of their head, like a circlet or like an armored headband that goes around. Again, this is a real quick example. But something that protects the crystals, so that for like combat and for warriors, it would protect it from physical damage, but also incoming psychic damage from a hostile force. There's another race that really likes circlets, but it's not due to protection. It's more like an accessory. Oh, I see what you're saying. Hard to see through. I see what you meant, Red Dragon. They're opaque. They're not transparent, so you can't see through them. They're a solid color, so kind of more like pearlescent. But I think opaque is probably the word you're looking for, where you can't like see through them. They're a solid color. All right. What kind of hair do I want to give this lady? Last one was... I'm trying to say sorry about it. Word. Nah, you're good, man. I got it. It took me a second, but I got it. I figured it out. Figured what you were asking. Could try bangs. I need to get more practice at drawing bangs. I suck at drawing bangs, mostly because I don't really like the way the bangs look on most people. kind of more like sharp angle cut bangs. That's a little bit easier to draw. There, like that a little bit better. Kind of like that more pulled back behind the ears look. It's not really tied, but more medium length hair, kind of tucked back a bit. Could be workshopped a little bit. It's not a hairstyle I draw a lot, but I could definitely use the practice. Kind of Bulma-ish now that I think about it. Wasn't even thinking about Bulma specifically, but that is kind of similar. Maybe a little bit longer than her hair. Her hair's a little bit shorter. Red Dragon asks, are the gems always formed in the same shape? Good question. I didn't give that a ton of thought. They're usually kind of more of a teardrop, like this, which is what I kind of did on both of these characters. They can be a little bit more narrow, almost like a diamond shape, but they're not sharp, so I got to be a little bit careful with that. And they're not round. They're more oval. I wanted to be a little bit careful because I didn't want this to look culturally inappropriate, which is something that might be confusing unless it's rendered in color. So that's why I went with this kind of shape here, because I could foresee that being something people latch on to, because people can latch on to dumb things. I think, if anything, to your point, Red Dragon, the size is going to be a little bit more variable than the shape. Because we're talking about races that have evolved over millions and millions of years. And so this particular trait is pretty well defined. And kind of like some other ones that are unique amongst the different races, because they've had so much time to evolve, those traits are going to be pretty consistent, if that makes sense. But I like the idea that certain factors like the size, or maybe even the color versus the shape, could be driven by factors for, you know, where the people are from. I didn't think too much about region. But that's definitely something to consider. Okay. Let's move these two over, and then we'll save our progress. And we definitely have time to start sketching out one of the outfits before we call it good. I want to talk a little bit about some of the design elements that contrast this particular race from the ones that came before them. So for this one, we'll put the female model over here on the left, and we'll switch their positions when we're done, just so that it's not always just aligned the same way. But we talked a little bit about the idea Maybe we'll have you looking off this way. Instead of straight on, we'll angle your face a little bit, just to, again, switch it up. Doesn't matter. We're not putting the facial details on here. That's why they're blank. Red Dragon asks, sorry, but could I get that template, the bare bodies? Oh, you mean the primary poses? Yeah. Yeah. You want me to scale them up? Do you want the faces too, or do you want me to just take the bodies and get rid of the faces? Because what I can do, I can up the I'll up the transparency. Oh, you want both? Okay, let's do this. If I don't do it now, I will forget. So let me do that real quick. I will scale these just a little bit larger in case you want to use them for character sketching or whatnot. I'm not too worried about credit or anything for this. It's just an asset, a resource. Let me delete out the color swatch here for the brush. Is this good enough, or do you need me to scale it up more? Because I can move these heads down a bit and then stretch everything a little bit more if you want. This is good? Okay. I'm going to save this as a ping. We'll call this base. Yes. I don't know why Clip Studio is so picky about the layer integrity when you're saving as something else. Doesn't matter. I'll put this in the media share. Anyone can use these. Yeah, anyone who's interested in using these can do them. We'll make that a global resource if that's okay with you, Red Dragon. We'll put you here. Where? There you go. .png's in media share. Again, I had to do it now because I will forget once I shut the stream down in a bit. So hopefully you can make use of those, even if it's just to practice or whatever. Go nuts, my dude. Oh yeah, I saved a different version. Don't worry. Clip Studio is weird because if you save a clip file as an image file, you lose the layer integrity and you can't go back. So I always save a copy first. That way I don't have that problem, because I've lost work that way and it is weak. All right. Let's start sketching out some of the details here. Whoops, that is... Where are we? Weird. What happened to my pen? There we go. Okay, so mention that this particular race is very close in proximity to the other one. They're two planets that are close together. Not all of the ones in this particular universe are close, but these two are basically sister worlds. And despite that, they are extremely different in culture and style and pretty much everything, which has led to some conflicts that are part of the storyline. In fact, they were at war. Without getting too much into detail, and that was a big deal. But like I mentioned before, this particular race, the psychic one, are big fans of obscuring more conservative garments. And so we're giving this lady, this is going to be a form of armor, but because they rely on psychic abilities, this particular race doesn't have like heavy armor. They have kind of these heavy fabric robes and coats, but they don't really wear like suits of armor and plating like some of the other races. The idea is you shouldn't be getting hit if you're able to protect yourself with your brain and your mind. How did that work when they were at war with the other race, which definitely doesn't adhere to those principles? A good question. Ooh. That was part of the story that I wrote. And we're going to do kind of like a sash around the midsection here. Functions like additional midsection protection, but mostly it's meant to tie up the garment. Kind of similar to like an obi in kimonos, but it's not straight. It's actually fastened at an angle, which is a little bit... I did not render that very well. This pattern here is actually like a striped decorative pattern that goes down from the shoulder here and also goes down the sleeve. Part of the decoration is this kind of stripe pattern. But this particular race, I gotta remember what their writing looks like. It's been so long. There's the one that has all the curves. Boy, I need to put a writing document together too for the way the runic characters look, because it has been so long. I may have to change this later. But writing decorations on their outfits is also pretty common. Let's see, how do I want to do this? This is more like a monastic scapular, which we've got some adaptations of that particular type of garment design on a couple races. For this one, I'm going to do something like this. It's more like a layered robe, and we'll work on some additional elements that are going to flesh out the design a bit, make it a little less plain. Also, in addition to the more conservative, obscuring type of garments that this particular race likes to wear, they tend to be very symmetrical. Patterning and coloring, not so much all the time, but the actual design is very symmetrical for a lot of cases. So, like, you wouldn't have a situation where, like, for this robe garment this lady's wearing, you wouldn't have a situation where one side has these sleeves and the other side just has, like, a bunch of things like that. Instead, it's going to be more or less identical. There might be a unique accessory or something being worn on the arm, like an armlet or something like that, but it's not going to be a completely different style of garment. It's going to be symmetrical. Hey, Sour Lad's here. What's up, Sour Lad? How are you doing this Wednesday evening? What does that first badge by your name mean? I have no idea what that means. But welcome to the drawing stream. We are continuing our discussion of character concepts, specifically concept sheets for the universe of fiction that I write for. Oh, Red Dragon says that first is one of the first to follow. Oh, that's great. Sour Lad is one of my first followers. I didn't even realize that. It's been so long. Very cool. Well, in addition to helping mod, I do appreciate Sour Lad and all you folks that stop by. We've had some really good discussions tonight talking about characters and character lore and universal lore and writing stuff. We learned about the project Red Dragon is working on. And I know Iconics talked about his before in the past too. Hey, Sour Lad, thanks for the 100 bits, my dude. Were you there in the YouTube days? I guess so. Oh man, that's such a long time ago now. That was 3 years ago? In the summer, it'll be 3 years, right? Didn't I debut in 21? Good lord. I've been doing this for 3 years. Ah, I see, Red Dragon. The Founder's Badge is a subscriber badge available for the first 10 Prime or paid subscribers of affiliate channels and the first 25 Prime paid subscribers of the partner channels. I see. Thanks for looking that up. Sarlat says you played Pokemon Uranium in the debut of Wazi. Oh yeah, God Hand. That was the God Hand streams. I never did beat Uranium. That game was really, really hard. I am enjoying Infinite Fusion much more than I did Uranium. On topic, we're going to be streaming your Infinite Fusion this week. We'll be getting back to it next week. But I've got some kind of cool to show you folks next time we play it. Infinite Fusion, that is. I have been doing some grinding, and I'll do some more before that stream for sure. But I'm probably going to be able to give you folks some choices as to what party of bug-based Pokemon I take. I basically went and either fused or leveled up a bug type or mixed type for every physical type in the game, except for normal, because I don't think normal's very good. And so I've been doing that off camera. I've been grinding up party members, and so you folks might be able to choose what I take with me. We have options now. Sarlat Ash, should I buy a smelting kit? A smelting kit for what? To smelt minerals? Getting into metallurgy? Alright, let's put some runic patterning on here. Oh, I think I remember how this race's writing looked like. I think their writing is kind of more vertical. Like I said, I gotta put a writing guide together. That's something else. That's on my list so I can remember all of them. A good majority of the ones that I work with in these different races, a lot, I can remember what their writing looks like, but some that I haven't in a while, I have forgotten. Oh, I see. Is this the smelting kit for potentially making a gift for Sarlat's cousin's quinceanera coming up soon? You think about making like maybe some custom jewelry or accessories or something? That could be useful. Like, I know nothing about smelting other than you better be careful when you're doing it because you're working with things at high temperature. Coins, yeah. Coins too, like a collectible or commemorative coins. That is also an interesting idea. Okay, working on foot gear here. I didn't think we'd actually finish this one, but we're almost done with the female model, so that's good. What we'll do is we'll finish off the foot gear, take a look at the rest, and we'll see where that leaves us. You know, speaking of accessories and jewelry and stuff, I forgot to tell you folks about something I did when I was in Japan. Like I said, I haven't done like a trip wrap up because I didn't do any content for it, so I figured unless you folks were curious to some of the stuff I did, I wasn't really gonna make a big spectacle about it. But I did do something really cool in Kyoto that is worth mentioning on topic of what Sarlat's talking about. My brother's fiance heard about this place online in downtown Kyoto. They went and checked out, and basically you go in there and you can customize and not cast or make, but you can customize your own jewelry. And specifically it's rings. So you can pick out like a material, a basic style, and then you can do things like have them custom texture and finish the ring with a bunch of different options, and then they work on it, and then you get to take it with you. And I don't think I've talked about this much. Maybe it's come up a couple times, but I do like jewelry. I just don't go out anymore, so I don't really have a chance to wear some of the rings I have, but I have several different rings. And one of my sterling silver ones looks like it's about to break because it's very old. And so I wanted to get a new one. So going to this place in Kyoto was perfect timing. So I ended up getting like a really large heavy gauge sterling silver band, and it has this, it's like a dull finish, but it has this brush texture on it, so it looks almost like tree bark. It's got a rough, not rough to the touch, but this textured streak texture all the way across it, and looks pretty cool. And that was a fun thing to do. My brother's fiance got like a white gold, this coil white gold ring that she liked. But if you folks are ever in Kyoto and want to check it out, let me know and I can link you to the place. Yeah, sorry, if you end up making or casting rather those flower patterns, you should definitely post the results so we can see what you're working on in MediaShare, because that sounds really cool. And I don't know much about metalworking, but it sounds like a really neat gift. Just be careful when working with hot metals. Don't burn yourself or your house down. All right, let's save our progress. So it says, yeah, hot metal is not nice. No, definitely not something you want to play around with unless you feel like getting third-degree burns. I've worked with sterling silver before. I casted my own ring a long time ago. It was a really cool one that had an insignia on it and everything. And then a long time ago in Earth School, I lost it. I think it got lost in the laundry somewhere. The sterling silver one I got much later as a simple like rounded band, but that other one had like a whole thing engraved into it. It was really cool. I also have a fairly heavy tungsten carbide ring, which will fit my middle or ring finger, but I can't wear it when I'm working on the computer because it's so heavy that typing hurts my hand. It actually hurts my joints because of the weight on my finger. So getting a lighter sterling silver ring was nice, but again, I only really wear them if I go out. I guess it means I should go out more. Okay, let's take a look at this particular design. So again, meant to be more armor-like. So this is like a combat outfit right here, but because this race doesn't use heavy plated protective armor for the most part, it's a little bit different in style than if we jump back to the previous one, this one here, which is very much plated sharp, even in some instances, metal in design. So two different philosophies here. Physical combat, which may or may not involve weapons, firearms, or other types of things, and mental combat, psychic, psionic abilities. And I'm thinking for this guy over here, the male model, there'll probably be a similar variation of a formal, or less formal rather, casual attire. Probably need to scale proportions down. I drew kind of like a real general, quote unquote, male proportions here, but this race is not like a physically heavily built race because they're psychics. They're a bit more lighter and slighter of built, shorter in height. So more of a slim build and maybe around the same height. Height, not too worried about, but I'll definitely have to adjust proportions and make this one a little bit less muscular. But let's zoom out, and also what I'll do is I'll hide the primary so you folks can see the faces. So what we've captured two examples of faces for this particular race and one of the outfit concepts. I will probably finish the second one off stream, and I think next time we do a drawing stream we'll do something different to mix things up. We'll either do like a sprite session, we're doing pixel sprites, or we'll be doing a different type of drawing, and then we'll return to this one at some point, and I might be even further along and I can show you folks what I've done. But today I wanted to continue this one and keep the momentum going. But next time we'll switch things up again. Oh man, my hand is sore. Usually my hand doesn't cramp, but I've been chugging for a little bit. Before we wrap up completely, let me go see who's online to raid. I'm a little bit earlier than normal, which is good because I got some stuff I need to go do. I see, let's see. Oh, Dio's online. Let's go raid Dio of the Dio Fest. Just chatting, I wonder what she's talking about. Let's go find out. I'm gonna go queue up the raid for Dio and get everything set up here. And what we will do is we will go to, let me pause BGM. We'll mute that and we'll go to outro. And we will call that a stream for today. We will be back tomorrow, Thursday. Remember what day of the week it is. Tomorrow we will be continuing in Dyson Sphere program. We picked up our save last week and we did make some progress. So we're going to keep pushing forward in DSP tomorrow. And then this weekend on Sunday we'll be starting something new. Haven't quite decided yet, but there will be something new in the rotation for gaming streams this weekend. Or if I can't think of anything, it'll be Monster Hunter. But I think I might do at least start something new so we can rotate in a new playthrough. So in the meantime, thanks again for hanging out, folks. It was awesome talking with you folks about characters and lore and story stuff. We'll definitely be doing this again. So in the meantime, hope you all have a good evening. Now let us go spread the chill vibes to Dio and see how she's doing. So I'll catch you folks tomorrow.